And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, episode number 36. To all your listeners out there, hello, and thank you so much for taking the time to stop by here today. As I said, my name is Mike, and I'm a photographer, podcaster, and small business owner based here in Sydney, Australia. Each week on the show, I bring you guys along on the highs and lows of my own creative journey and share all the knowledge that I've gained along the road to building my own freelance business. This week's episode, we're talking about the idea of quantity versus quality, something that I go back on a lot, and I actually get a lot of questions asking me about what is the best way to go about creating content. I actually have a few ideas on this, and I really want to bring it up in this week's episode to really get it out there in the world and let you guys know on some of my own opinions on this and some of the things that I've done in the past and some of the things that have really helped me moving forward into trying to create more quality work. But before we jump into that, let's talk about what has been going on for me this past week. And I really want to touch on what I spoke about in last week's episode, which was all about my anxiety about going back to work. And as you guys know, last Friday, I went and shot a wedding for the first time in over 4 months, and that was really exciting. Being in lockdown for so long, I've been waiting for an opportunity like this to come along because I haven't actually been able to go out and go work for so long. And so that was so nice to actually get out there and work. But obviously there was some fear that came into that because I was scared about how I would go. I was scared about how I would go interacting with other people, but then also how my own skills would go as a photographer and being, I suppose, unequipped and unprepared over the past couple of months, having not worked for so long. But I think all those fears were alleviated as soon as I turned up because I was really just in the element, I guess, of something that I've really known how to do and I've been practicing for quite some time. So it all really did come back, and I was really glad that I was able to be there on the day and be able to provide a service that I know was helping other people because of the fact that they could only have such small numbers at the wedding. And I was there in a crucial role, being able to take photos and actually document the day for them because that was something really special that they really wanted to have that photographer there and have someone actually document the day for them because no one else was allowed to be there, only allowed to have 5 guests at the moment. So that was really nice to actually be there on the day. And as I said, all those fears sort of went out the window and we really got the job done. I was really glad because it was a bit of a shorter sort of session, I guess, as opposed to what a normal wedding would be, a normal 8 to 10 hour day. That was only sort of an hour and a half sort of session, which was really nice to get me back in and sort of improve my skills as we go because I can get some of those more sort of detailed shots that are more targeted to an actual wedding day and some of the things that you wouldn't be able to get outside of a wedding day. So that was really nice for my own skills, and it was great to be able to be there and interact with other people. I haven't really interacted with other people outside of my household for quite some time, so that was really, really nice as well. And I'm sure I'll be talking a bit more about it in the next coming weeks and talking about how the whole process went with the editing of all the photos and things like that. And I'm sure you guys will see a couple of those online, but I just wanted to let you guys know that it did go really well. But I'm glad that I made last week's episode when I did because there was that fear and there was that stress about having to return to work, and I was really glad that I got that out there into the world and be able to give that to other people because I think it is something that people will go through either towards the end of this year or early next year, having to go back to work in an environment that they haven't been in for quite some time. Now, the other thing that's been going on for me this past week was that I had my COVID vaccine. Now, I don't really want to talk about that too much here on the podcast, but I just want to let you know because I'm recording this episode on a Friday. I had my vaccine on Wednesday. I normally record the podcast on a Tuesday, and I didn't get around to it on the Tuesday, and I thought it's fine. I've got my vaccine on Wednesday morning, and I'll record it Wednesday afternoon when I get home. And then I was just sort of completely wiped out for the rest of Wednesday and Thursday. So it's now Friday afternoon and I'm recording this episode, but I'm glad to really get this out because I think it really leads into what we're talking about today. I want to make this a rather short episode, but I think I've got quite a bit of information to provide in this episode because it's something that I get asked about a lot, and it's something that I'm really okay, I think, to speak on because it's something that I've experimented a lot with myself as well and sort of seen the way that it can help me and the way that it can help other people because I think it's a really important thing to talk about, and it's something that definitely does hold a lot of people back. I know I've sort of touched on these sort of themes before on the podcast, but I don't think I've been as specific as this and really wanting to address some of the things that I really think about this and which way we should be really trying to go about these types of things. So let's just jump into today's topic, which is quantity versus quality, something that I get asked about a lot. And in this episode, I'm going to be specifically talking about it from a sort of artistic and creative career standpoint of someone who's trying to create content, trying to create things in their own life and trying to create things for either a job or a career and things like that. So should we be focusing our time on trying to create more quality content and spending all our day trying to create one piece of content that is really good, or should we be spending our day trying to create multiple pieces of content that may not be up to the same standard because we can't put as much time and effort into them, but trying to create multiple pieces of content that may not be as good, but still be able to get some reach and still be able to have a positive impact on people. And I'm going to start with a pretty strong opinion that I have about this, and that is that quality is not better than quantity. Rather, the former is a product of the latter. And that is to say that quantity leads to quality. And I really want to touch on that today because that is something that I've found myself, and I've found it a lot over the past couple of years with everything that I've started, and trying to produce a lot of content leads to the quality of that content improving. And we're talking here from a standpoint of someone who's first starting out. We're not talking about someone who's had years of experience because they've probably gone through this as well. So if you're starting from a standpoint of already being able to produce quality content, then maybe you should be going about producing quality content. But we're going to be talking about a couple of things today in some of the areas where I think you should be producing more content and not focusing so much on the quality of the content, of course, up to some standpoint, but not focusing on that last sort of 20% and trying to more focus on how much content you can produce. And so with that idea of just starting out, I want to give you guys a story, and it may be one that you've heard before, it may not be, but it's the story of the photography class where there was an experiment done with a photography class where half the class was asked to work on a project for the end of the year, and their aim was to produce the best quality photo that they possibly could. So half the students in the class, that was their aim for the whole year, was to try to produce the best quality photo that they possibly could. Now, this was in the olden days, I guess. I think in the 80s and the 70s, where you would actually have to develop photos and actually have it all done on film and things like that. So very old school style photography, where photography was more of a process that did take a longer period of time. So this wasn't out of a scope of something which they would have been asked to do, right? And then the other half of the class was asked to produce as many photographs as they possibly could throughout the year. So there was no goal on how good they had to be. They just had to produce as many as they possibly could in all different types of styles, right? So producing as many as they possibly could, and that was the aim for that half of the class. So whoever could produce the most photographs by the end of the year, obviously, was the person who won there. So independent of one another, those two halves of the class there were asked to do completely different, separate things for their end project for the end of the year. When they had a look at all the photographs from the end of the year, when the teachers went back over and looked at the photographs, it was obvious that the photos that the side of the class that was asked to take more photos, the quality of that work was a lot better than the quality of the work of the half of the class that was asked to produce a good quality of work, right? So they spent all their year trying to produce one image that was of amazing standard. But the problem was with that half of the class was that they were too focused on producing quality that they never actually produced anything. They were too worried about trying to study and trying to research and put things into play and think about what it is they could do to produce an image. Whereas the other class were experimenting. The other class were trying things. The other half of the class were producing images so that by the end of the year, they'd already gone through the highs and lows. They'd had failures, they'd learned from them. And then they were able to produce images by the end of the year that were a lot better than the other half of the class that had never tried any of those things before and knew how they would go. If you're just trying to really get caught up in producing quality work and producing perfection, as we've spoken about here before, you'll never actually try anything. You'll never actually get out there and produce work to know what will go wrong and to know where you need to change things and to know what you need to do next in order to create quality work. Now, this is obviously very subjective, but the idea of quality is an idea that anyone can have. But in this class, it was fairly blindingly obvious which side of the class was producing more quality work by the end of the year, even though that was not their brief. Their brief was to produce as much work as they possibly could. The quality of the images were much better. And so I think that really drives home the point that quantity produces quality from that standpoint of people when they're just starting out. If you're already producing quality, then maybe you don't need to go about producing heaps of work. Maybe you should sort of start to narrow down and just produce quality work. And you can get to that point towards the end of a career, maybe where you're only producing quality work and you're only trying to put work out there very infrequently. But by the time your work comes out, people know that it's going to be quality. But I think in the beginning stages, you should really be focusing on quantity, and that will lead, I think, in the end, to producing quality work. There are a few points that I really want to touch on here, but the first one, and one of the key reasons why I think a lot of people have steered towards quantity over the past couple of years is that search engines and social media are rewarding quantity. Now, you're more likely to be found on either a search engine or on social media like Instagram or say on TikTok or something like that if you're producing more work. So the more work you're getting out there, the more likely you are to be found. It's one of the main reasons why people who are trying to start out on YouTube will be posting a lot of content. Now, it's very hard to produce a lot of content that is also quality, and that is something that you do have to sort of weigh up. You have to get it over some certain standard of quality, but to a point, the more work you produce, the more likely you're going to be able to be found by more people, and the more likely you are then going to actually grow in that industry. So a lot of people are sort of switching to creating more quantities of work rather than just focusing all their time on creating one piece of quality work. Recently on social media, I've been trying to post a lot more work and post more quantity of work, and I've really found that has led to more people being able to discover my work. It's sort of a combination of starting to post more content on Reels, on Instagram and things like that, and it being able to be more discoverable, but also the more quantity that I seem to be posting, the more likely it is to be pushed out there, and the more likely more people are going to be able to see your work. You just have to think about that in that idea that if the more work you have out there, the more chances people are going to have to scroll past your work. So if you're producing content all the time, then more likely people are going to actually click on your work and to actually go past and actually see your work. So you really want to be getting as much work out there as you possibly can. And I've been trying to really do that recently. And I know I spoke about it on an episode a few weeks ago about trying to avoid that sort of idea of perfectionism, because that is something that can hold you back. Once you get to that 80% mark, maybe move on to the next piece of content. Once it's 80% of the way there, move on, because you're not going to get much more out of it. Once you go past 80% of it being your idea of perfect, you're not going to get much more out of it. So maybe you should just have it out there online and see how it goes and move on to the next thing. And that's been something that I've been really doing recently on Reels, and also with my photography and things like that, is just trying to post content and moving on to the next piece, because I know I'm learning a lot more from actually posting that content rather than just having it on my computer and trying to work on it and trying to perfect it over the course, where I may not actually see anything from that. I think this is something that you see a lot these days on Instagram, with people sort of bombarding you with content. You're always seeing content from the same people. There's a reason behind that. They're not sort of targeting you because you're already following them. So they're not targeting you. They're targeting other people outside of that. And the more content they're posting, the more likely it is to be discovered by people who aren't following them. So it may get a bit annoying to you if you're someone who is already following them. But outside of that, I think it is able to be done, and it is able to be more discoverable by other people who aren't actually following you. And you'll see this in other areas, like I was talking about on search engines. You'll see this with people with their website. People will be updating blog posts a lot of the time. I'm not someone that updates my blog posts a lot, and I probably should update blog posts on my website more often than I do. It's not really something that I enjoy, but people who do update their blog posts a lot will continually be updating them quite often and be sort of shortening down the actual length of their content. They would much rather be posting a sort of shorter blog post every day of the week than one big blog post every single week. Now, it depends on the area that you're in. If you have a very large audience and you're not trying to sort of target new people, and you're sending out, say, like a newsletter every single week, you don't want to be sending one out every single day and upping the sort of quantity of that content. You really want to be sort of targeting, and you know who you're trying to get. You're not trying to discover new people with that content. But if you're someone who's updating blog posts on their actual website, and people aren't sort of tuning in every single day to read the new one, they're sort of more informational. The types of stuff that I would be posting as a wedding photographer, say, is to help people who are in the stages of trying to get married. So they're not going to be looking at that after they get married. They're probably not going to be looking at it all the time either. They're going to be looking at it for a short window of time. And so I'm trying to discover new people all the time. I want people to be discovering my work. So the more I can be posting blog posts, the more that people are likely to discover them on search engines and things like that. It also goes the other way in saying that the more blog posts you write about a particular topic, the more you look like an expert in that particular field. So search engines will push that when people type that into their search engine, because they think that you're more of an expert on it than someone who has only written, say, one blog post about it. You've written, say, 5 or 10, so you're going to look like more of an expert about it. So they're going to push your content out there to more people. So it's been rewarding people writing more content rather than writing a longer blog post. They're rewarding people who are trying to write shorter blog posts but produce more of them. And as I said, you will see this on other places like YouTube and on TikTok. Even in like music this day and age, people are producing so much music. They're releasing albums every single year. This is a lot more than they ever would have in the old days, but this is so it's able to be more discoverable. You know, we're seeing people producing shorter albums. We're seeing people produce shorter length of song to try to produce more songs. Even more often, and even like in movies and TV shows, they're producing more TV shows rather than focusing heavily on the quality. They're focusing more on the quantity and trying to push as much out there as they possibly can to keep their audience engaged, to keep people all over on top of their stuff. And this is a big point in that you need to be able to stay relevant. And this is something that I try to do on Instagram a lot, of course, is try to stay relevant to people. I want to be pushing content so that if someone does see a piece of my content and they don't immediately click on it, if they do see another piece of my content in a few days' time, it's still sort of relevant in their mind. So they're more likely to click on that second post. If they've seen something from me recently, they're more likely to click on that second post. And that is one of the biggest reasons why you want to be producing a lot of quantity, because that second post, that third post that they see of yours is more likely to engage them because it's someone that they've seen before. They've been like, oh, I've seen a couple of posts by this person now. Maybe now I'll go and click on their stuff, right? The first time, it's very hard to sort of convert someone in any type of sense. If you're looking on your website as well, if you're posting heaps of images on your website, if you're posting blog posts and someone scrolls past you, they're probably not going to sign up to your newsletter the first time they see something. On YouTube, if they see a video from you, they're probably not going to subscribe to the first one that they watch from you. You post a few and they start to see a couple from you, then that's when they're going to think, oh, I've really enjoyed the content from this person because I've seen a few pieces of their content now. I'm more likely to subscribe. And it's more about trying to stay relevant to people and trying to get them in the door and trying to get them converted into someone who is following you and someone who is subscribing to your work and actually really caring about what it is you're trying to do. And then I think the other side to that is also true, where if you're just trying to produce quality work all the time, you can start to get too attached to the work you're producing, to the point where if you spend so long producing a piece of content and then you put it out there in the world and no one seems to engage with it, no one seems to really enjoy it, you can start to question your own work. You can start to question what it is you're trying to do, and that could send you in the opposite direction where you don't actually produce anything again for quite some time. And you don't ever want to be in that position where you're getting too attached to individual pieces of work. Obviously, if you're trying to work on something for a longer period of time, if you've sort of built up to that point where you have enough confidence in your own work that it's not going to really matter what other people do, but of course, to some extent, you want people to enjoy your work and you want to know what it is you enjoy. Whereas I think the opposite, when you go and produce a lot of quantity of work, you can start to gauge what it is your audience enjoys. You can start to gauge what it is actually working out there. You can start to gauge what it is people actually do like, because your idea of what you think is perfect may not be anyone else's idea. So if you're producing a lot of work, you can start to gauge that over time. You can start to gauge whether your work is going to do well, and then you can sort of work up to those larger pieces of content that do require more energy, that do require you to take longer periods of time and work on them for longer, so that they in the end can be producing sort of that better quality. And then it's okay because you've sort of gone back and tested those types of things. Whereas if you're getting too engaged in the start and too attached to the work you're trying to do, that can easily send you the opposite way if it's not having the effect that you really want it to. If you're producing large quantities of work, then your expectations on what you think the work is going to do are going to be a lot below what it would have been if you were just trying to produce quality work, right? So if you're producing a large quantity of work, your expectations of what that's going to do isn't great. You know, you're not expecting it to do amazing, but you just really want to get work out there in the world. So if someone does praise you on a piece of that work, it's going to mean a lot more because your expectations were very low. So if you just get one person say it was so good, that's going to really help you. You're going to be continuing to make that actual type of work. Whereas if you're expecting it to be amazing and you only get your one person say that it was really good, you're going to be like, oh, I didn't get 8 people, I didn't get 10 people, I didn't get 100 people saying it was great, you know? So you're going to be easily turned the other way and think, oh, this work isn't very good, I don't know where to go now. Whereas when you're producing a lot of small pieces of work that may not be perfect, but they're still pretty good, if anyone says they're good, then that's going to help you to continue moving on and continue to keep working because that reward is what keeps us going. And I think that's a good segue into my next point, which is that quality is subjective. Now, I've spoken about this before, but I really want to touch on it in today's episode because I think it adds to what we're talking about here. Because if we're trying to produce quality work, what is the idea of quality? And it's very subjective. It's up to every different individual. It's up to the types of people you're trying to attract. It's up to your audience, up to the different, like a medium you're producing in, all these things, right? And up to a point, who is to say that just because you think your work is good quality is to say that anyone else is going to think that's good quality? No one else may even enjoy that. There may not be anyone else in your audience who thinks that that is really good work. There may not be other people out there who think it's amazing, or you may not actually get that work to the people who are going to think it's amazing. So what is your idea of actual quality work? And that is very subjective, and we should never be trying to aspire to produce perfection because no one has a definition on that. And same thing is true with quality work. No one knows what actual quality work is. It's very subjective. Anyone could think anything about any piece of content. So we shouldn't be trying to produce quality. We should just be trying to put as much out there and then sort of understanding what people enjoy from being able to put as much work out there in the world as we possibly can. Now, I say all this and I say that quality is subjective, but it only works up to a certain point, right? You can't be just producing anything. You can't just be throwing any random work out there in the world. It needs to be good up to some certain standard. You can't just be producing really average work. I couldn't go start posting images that I've just taken on my iPhone, just of the ground here on Instagram and just having that out in the world and just seeing if it's good because I think it's artsy. That isn't up to at the certain amount of quality that I need it to be. So it needs to be up to some threshold. I like to compare it to the example of if you earn more money, will that make you happier? And up to a certain point, yes, it will. But after that, it's not going to make you any more happier. Once you can afford to survive, once you can afford to live and eat and have a roof over your head, any more money that you earn probably isn't going to make you happier. And there has been a bunch of studies done on this to say that people aren't any more happier with any more amount of money in their life. So up to a point, yes, it is going to help, and people who have absolutely no money will probably be a lot happier with some amount of money. But up to a certain threshold, after that, you're not going to be any more happier. It's the same with this. We need to be up to that threshold of actually good quality work, but over that threshold, just because the quality is improving doesn't mean that the work is going to perform better. Doesn't mean that anyone else is going to think it's more quality just because you do over that certain standard. You have to be producing to some standard. Up to some certain point, you can't just be producing anything and throwing it out there in the world. It needs to be to some standard that general people would think it's okay. But after that, it doesn't need to be amazing. It doesn't need to be the best piece of content that they have seen all year because you're not going to be able to produce that every single day. You can't produce the best content all year, every day because it's not going to be the best content all year, right? So we've got to be producing up to some sort of standard that I'm happy with it for today. It's the best piece that I produced probably in the hour and it's out there, right? It has to be to some level, but after that, there's no point stressing on it because once we hit that 80%, that law of diminishing returns comes in where it says that the effort and the time that you're going to be putting into it to get it from 80% to 100 isn't worth the effort that you could be spending to get a new piece of content up and be able to learn more skills and learn more things from the things that you learned from actually posting that last piece of work. By actually putting that piece of work out there in the world, you're going to learn a lot more than what you would learn by trying to get that piece of work from 80% good to 100% and trying to be perfect. On that point, quantity is geared towards market testing, right? So if we're producing a large amount of work, we can actually test and see which pieces of that work have done the best, and then from that, steer in those directions. It's like the example I use for producing this podcast. I've produced that many episodes now that I know which ones have performed well. I know which ones people are interested in. I know what styles of episodes people like. I know what topics tend to do well. So I can sort of produce work in that area. It's all things that I enjoy, but now I know what other people enjoy as well because I've put a large quantity of work out there that I've now gotten to a point where I can sort of realize what it is people actually enjoy. And then I can start to sort of narrow that down again and narrow it down again based on what I think other people are enjoying and based on the content that I'm enjoying producing, and the skills that I'm learning along the way are allowing the next episodes to be even better than the last ones, allowing the quality of that content to be improving, but still keeping up the quantity. And in that way, we're learning a lot from it and learning a lot in those different iterations that we're making. It's all about the speed that we can iterate on the next product. If we produce a piece and it's not performing as well as we should, well, maybe the next piece, we need to be really fast on knowing what to change and how to change it. If we're not producing the work, we can't know what to change and we can't know the direction in which the next piece should be trying to go in. If we're only producing one piece of content every month, then we're not going to be learning a lot over the course of a year. We're only learning 12 things over the course of that year, as opposed to someone producing a piece of content every single day. They're learning 365 things every year because they're producing a different piece and hopefully improving on every single one of them. And so by the end of the year, that person is going to learn a lot more and learn more about their audience and about the style and about what it is they can do to improve their work than the person who's just trying to aspire to be perfect on their post every single month. And now I don't want this whole episode to sound like you just have to throw all your work out there and be able to put as much work into the world as you possibly can, because there are times, there are circumstances where producing good quality work is more important than producing a large quantity of work, right? For example, when I launched my print store a few weeks ago, one of the big takeaways I learned from that was that I put too many images on that print store. I should have probably brought it down. And it's again with the 80-20 principle that 20% of the images on the print store earned me over 80% of my actual profits that I made from the print store. Or again, only 20% of the images that I had on there resulted in 80% of the clicks that had through to those images. So most of the views were on 20% of the images that I had on that store. So the other 80% weren't producing me as much at all. And I probably could have narrowed that down, and I probably could have produced the amount of quantity of images on that store. So for next time, I'll be thinking about how I can reduce that and how I can give people probably less option, because the more option you give people, the more indecisive they are going to be, and they're going to be sort of going back and forward. So in that instance, we don't want to be producing a large quantity of work, because we don't want to be giving people too much choice. It's the same when I go and take photos at a wedding, right? I'm not going to give people 4,000 photos of their wedding, because no one's going to want to look through that. No one wants to look through 4,000 photos. Yeah, there might be some good ones in there, but that's my job to go through them and choose the good ones out for them. I'm not going to produce 4,000 photos for them and just say, here you go, here they all are, you can go look through them, because no one's going to appreciate that. People pay me for the service to reduce the quantity of images there and only produce the quality ones, only hand them the quality ones, the ones that I think are good and the ones that they will probably think are good as well. So there are definitely circumstances where this doesn't apply, but for the most part, when we're trying to be discovered online, when we're trying to produce something, when we're trying to grow a business, when we're trying to grow something online, on social media, wherever it is, I think quantity has its place. And I think this has been definitely something that has helped me over the past few months, of the past few years, in trying to produce as much work as I possibly can, produce it in a vast variety of areas and see which ones work. Be able to put your work out there and actually test it for yourself and see what areas work and what areas probably don't. It's the same with like ads on Instagram, ads on Facebook. If you're not actually producing ads on Instagram, how do you know what is going to work? So it's having that repetition in to be able to see what it is that is actually going to work. You can learn so much from sitting down and watching hours of YouTube videos, but if you're not applying the stuff, if you're not putting it out there in the world, you're never going to know. And so the best way to learn is from learning from your own mistakes, learning from things that you've done before. They're going to help you in the future because you've made those mistakes, and they're easier to learn from because they're applicable in your own life. And so if there's one takeaway from today's episode, guys, I would say that it is to produce as much work as you possibly can. Of course, it has to be to some threshold, but after that, be able to put work out there in the world. Don't be scared to put it out there and see how it goes and see where it goes, and be able to know that once you get results from that, move on very quickly and move and see what you can take away from it. What were the positives? What were the negatives? And move on to the next piece, because stressing about trying to create perfect work is never going to get you those results, and it's never going to get you results online in an era where most of our work is probably only discovered on social media and in search engines online and things like that. So in this area that we're in, producing a larger quantity of work is going to be a lot better in the long term than just producing a few pieces of quality. And so that is where I'm going to leave today's episode, guys. I hope you did really appreciate this and really gain something from it. I think it's an important point, and it's something worth reflecting on for your own business and your own creative journey, where seeing where you can apply this in your own life. I think it's really worked for me, but I only know this from actually trying it. I know this from being able to put a lot of work out there in a short period of time. It may not have always been the best work, but I learned from it in the long run. And over the course of a long period of time, I grew more than I probably would have if I was too stressed about only producing quality work. So give this a go in your own life. If it is something you're already trying, I'd love to know how it is going for you guys, and I'd love to know what it's been trying to do for you, how it's been helping you as well, how you've been trying to grow from it. Have a think about it. Have a think about the things you're learning from actually putting work out there, because you're probably learning more than you actually think you are. So I really hope you guys did enjoy this one. As I say every week, I would love it so much if you did share this episode around. Share it with someone who you think would also benefit from this. Share it with someone who you think is not putting as much of themselves out there as they possibly should be. Share it with someone who you think this could really help. Think that this could help grow their business, because I think in a lot of ways it could help a lot of people, and being able to know this and being able to know how to test and how to move on with your own work is really important, and it's more important to learn from yourself than to learn from other people. So we should really be trying to give this a go. So I hope you guys really did appreciate this episode, and I hope you all have a great week, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye.